So here we are again at Bitesize Edge with another podcast with one of our, as we've affectionately called them, Edgeites. Morning, Tom.
Morning.
How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, very well indeed.
Excellent. So today we've got Tom White with us who, well, Tom, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do, because our paths haven't directly crossed, but kind of indirectly with our history have crossed. So tell me a little bit about your role and everything.
Absolutely. So I work for the John Lewis Partnership and have done for about 17 years. And I spent the vast majority of that time within the learning and development space. Originally started off quite a few years ago as a trainer, technical training. So I spent a lot of time showing people how to make coffee, showing people how to fillet fish and how to fill sandwiches or use till systems. And then probably about 7 years ago, I started making the move into behavioural learning and cultural learning for managers and leaders and the business. And that's pretty much what I do now. The role that I do at the moment focuses primarily on the senior leadership of a particular area of the business and helping them develop themselves, develop their teams, develop the potential. So that's the day job, and then I'm also a development coach as a sideline. That's internally within John Lewis, supporting individuals with whatever it is that they are working on at that particular point in time. It's mainly a work focus, but that does spill over into their own lives sometimes, and that's okay. But primarily it is about development within the workspace. So I kind of have a day job and then I have a bolt-on, but the bolt-on for me is more than a bolt-on. It's something I absolutely love doing. And that's...
Sorry,
go on.
so that's quite interesting because you say you've been there nearly 17 years.
Yeah.
So where our paths kind of cross is that I also worked at the John Lewis Partnership, and I managed 17 years. And the interesting thing, and I was working this out, I left in 2000. So our paths would have been out by a couple of years. But when I was there, they had the technical training department. I remember that well. And they had management development, but they didn't really, and that was all very much around fairly atypical leadership skills, not the behavioural or the resilience or even the mental wellness elements of it. So how has it diversified, and how's your role kind of mapped into that shift and change?
Absolutely, yeah. So you're absolutely spot on, Pip. Certainly when I first joined Waitrose training, as it was then, it was very much about either technical skills on how to do a job, or it was technical skills as to how to be a manager, how to influence, how to be better, how to develop talent. But it was about technical skills, and I think probably 4 to 5 years ago, we really made a shift. And what was a really big catalyst was emotional intelligence. And really understanding that and really wanting to weave that into the culture of leadership within the John Lewis Partnership. And what we asked for and what we wanted and what we were going after was to move away from a command and control style of leadership and move much more towards emotionally intelligent leaders that are based on great relationships and having employees that want to work for them as opposed to having to work for them. So I'd say that was a shift probably 4 to 5 years ago, and that manifested in some different programs, and we have been through a number of different leadership programs over those last few years. But I think it probably does come down to realizing that emotional intelligence is the way forward, and that's probably what kicked it all off.
Okay. And do you think any of that was aligned? Because obviously, again, for my when I was at the partnership, people didn't get made redundant, for instance. That redundancy still had a bit of a negative bias to it, and whereas now actually it's quite commonplace in many industries, isn't it? And there's been a big shift in a number of retail organisations, John Lewis being one of them, where to be more competitive, to be more compelling, to be more kind of cutting edge, they've had to change the way in which they work, which has often resulted in a number of redundancies or, realignment programs, or however you want to call it. was there any timing element attached to some of the work that the partnership's done with that, with them also discovering that they might need to look at introducing a little bit more around emotional intelligence? Or is it just fortuitous?
No, I think it probably is just a little bit fortuitous. To be honest, I think the change of tack with what the expectation is of leaders came before any of the organisational change work that we've done. So yeah, 4 to 5 years ago, I think maybe even a touch longer than that is when that sort of change of focus for leadership came in. And then the organisational change work that's been going on across the business has been maybe the last 2 to 3 years. So I think there's probably strategically above my pay grade, there may have been some strategy involved with that, but certainly from my own personal point of view, it looked like the change of focus probably came a few years before any sort of restructure work that we've been doing.
And how's the change in focus to the more emotional intelligence based training and development? How's that been received within the organisation? How have you found that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, and there's always going to be, and this is the same for any organisation, I imagine, there's always going to be a group of people who absolutely get it and they're on board with it and they have high levels of emotional intelligence quite naturally. You'll then have some that want to know more and they want to understand it, they want to grow that emotional intelligence and develop themselves. And there will always be a pocket of people who fear the changes or fear the change in expectation and aren't as up for it or aren't as ready for that sort of change. So, I think every leader across the business has been through some sort of journey over the last few years. And for some people, they've had a real head start and they've been up for it and they've been trailblazing it. For other people, there's been, it's been much more of a challenge. And there's even been some people that have decided, actually, this isn't the business I want to stay in. I'm not so keen on what I'm being asked to do now, so have chosen a different path entirely. So like I say, individual paths for individual people across those years.
And I think you're absolutely right there, Tom, because what you've just highlighted there is people's response to change in whatever environment that might be, and personally, professionally, whether it's in a high street retail or whether it's in a global telecom organisation, we all instinctively have responses to change, don't we?
Yeah.
Some of us are more embracing of it than others, and that's absolutely right. So if you think again about your journey then, having started off as a technical trainer, filleting fish, and I remember learning how to do that with my white wellies, through to where you are now. What's been the key for you adapting to that change for yourself?
Oh yeah, so I give you a little context behind that one then. So when I was a technical trainer, what I loved about technical trainer was there was a right and a wrong way of doing things. On a till, there is a right way of using a till, a wrong way of using a till. There is a right way of filleting a fish, a wrong way of filleting a fish, or not as a productive way of filleting a fish. So that was what I really enjoyed, that it was very black and white. And I knew the answers. I had the skills, so I got a lot from being the expert in that particular space. And at the time, I also viewed management development as being quite fluffy because it was in the grey and it was about how do you feel, and that for me was not at all what I was interested in. But then, as technical training started to wane and behavioural stuff started to come in, I started going, okay, well, this is actually quite interesting. What I once deemed to be quite fluffy was quite interesting. And suddenly it was less about how do fish work or how does the coffee machine work, and it started becoming more how do people work and how do people think. And that was really the hook for me. That I've got quite I'm naturally inquisitive anyway, and I've got quite an obsessive mind in terms of I want to know everything. I want to know how things work. And what I really shifted was from like I say, how a coffee machine works to how do people work, and that's really the space that I've started to explore. And actually, probably 3 to 4 years ago, I had a complete switch over where now the concept of being right and there being only one way to do things is hideously limiting in my mind. And the thought of there being the right way for you might be very different to the right way for me. That's fascinating. That is truly, really and utterly interesting to me. And how people work and how people think, that's what fascinates me now. And if I bring in MBTI for a moment, when you do your Myers-Briggs best fit, and you do some of those things where it talks about this might be the best sort of career path for you, or jobs that you might have been interested in are this, that and the other. Constantly the roles that come out for me are engineer and psychologist and architect and things like that, which are different to what I do, but they're all to do with understanding how things work and how things are put together and how you can take them apart and rearrange them. And that's absolutely true to what I do now. In my world of developing people, it is about understanding how people work and how they think and helping them put their own picture together. So that, that's a bit of a roundabout answer, but that's more or less how I've shifted over the last sort of seven years or so, I think.
Fascinating. When you started that off and you said about there only being one answer, one right or whatever, for a moment there, Tom, I envisaged you having that there's a big old role for you in politics right now. If you want to diversify even more, we could do with someone like you living at called number 10. But there we go. So with that shift across, how has that impacted your world, do you think, from you personally, from what have you learnt about yourself? Let's put it that way. What have you learnt about yourself as part of that shift?
I think what I've learned is that I mentioned before that I can be a little obsessive about things, and that does manifest in my day life. I do think things through quite a lot. I have been known from time to time to be a bit of a worrier, but I think what this sort of shift has allowed me to do is to think, actually, that's okay. It's okay to think about things, because quite often what I'm doing when I am overthinking is because I'm thinking things from a lot of different perspectives, and I'm trying to get a round view rather than just being there being one way to solve this problem. What other ways could I be looking at this? And actually, are there other perspectives where this isn't necessarily a problem? It's maybe an opportunity. So that's really useful, being able to look at things from different approaches and being able to think. And I think what I've given myself more time to do is think about things. So rather than it being, I know the answer to this and I'm just going to go with that course of action, actually, let's take a step back. Let's give this some thought. Let's do some really quality thinking and brainstorming as to how I might approach this. Is it the problem I think it is? Is it the opportunity I think it could be? How else could I approach this? How might other people approach this as well? And that's another thing. I'm much more consultative now than I ever used to be. And when I was in expert mode, I knew the answer because that was my way of doing things. Whereas now, I got a real appreciation that actually other people will approach this in an entirely different way to the way that I would. And that's really useful, really useful to be able to feed in a completely external perspective to my own. That might give me a better result. And particularly when I'm worrying about things, I talk to my wife quite a lot when I'm worrying, and she gives me a completely different perspective of somebody who doesn't really worry. And that's really useful, So I think if I were to umbrella all of that, I've just got a much more open mind to possibility these days than I ever have before.
That's refreshing, isn't it? That's empowering as well. Hugely.
Yeah, it really is empowering. I mean, that's a great word to describe it. It is empowering, because what I found when worrying has been quite debilitating, just having that time to think and step back and take a different perspective or get a different opinion, it is absolutely empowering. Yeah.
So you talked about Myers-Briggs, obviously. I know you've also done some other coaching qualifications and things alongside. You fairly recently, started and completed some of your NLP journey with us here at Edge. How have you found NLP and the toolkit that offers? How's that fitted into your new way of being, or how's it resonated with existing behaviours and attitudes that you were exhibiting and have? How's it all merged?
Yeah, I mean, well, it all fits together. It fits together brilliantly, So I think when I talk to people about NLP and why I've done it and how I use it, I quite often talk about the different areas of my life that it feeds into. So sort of professionally, my world of facilitation The subjects that I talk about, are mostly around change or resilience or dealing with ambiguity, and that's all about people and how they interpret things and how they're processing things. So NLP just really helps me tap into what's going on for people, and trying to go beyond what they're saying, and almost it's about what they're not saying, or what their face is saying, or what their eyes are saying. So some of the skills that I've learned with NLP and some of the new awareness I have through NLP really helps me be the best learning facilitator I can be, by being more in tune with what my delegates are and aren't saying. And that then spills over into my role as a learning consultant. So when I'm not in the classroom delivering learning, I'm helping leaders in my business understand what learning might be able to do for them, or what learning might help them, or what might be going on for their teams. And again, that's where NLP can really help me communicate to my stakeholders in terms of, what are you saying? What can I read between the lines? What are you not necessarily saying? And that's useful when some leaders perhaps don't understand that they might be part of the issue, and it's not necessarily their employees. They may be part of it, so that helps me with having some braver conversations. It helps me challenge and tug and pull a little bit, more so than I might have done previously. I think about my coaching work. It's described as a bolt-on or a sideline, but it's becoming more and more a big focus for me. And when I'm working one-on-one with clients, NLP has helped me tremendously understand what people are saying and why they're saying it, and then some of the practical tools that I've learned through the practitioner qualification have come in hugely useful. So the likes of submodalities works and belief changes and chunking, some of those practical tools I've used with my clients since qualifying, and it's really challenged my clients' thinking, which is exactly what I'm trying to achieve as a coach, which is fantastic. So it plays in beautifully there. But then outside of work, I'm married and I've got 2 young children, and some of the NLP thinking and principles, more so than the techniques and tools, but just the mindset behind it. I think about that sort of stuff a lot with my kids, and I talk about it quite a lot with my wife. And she sees some of the things that I've done since qualifying and some of the goals that I've achieved. And she says, rather jokingly, oh, you need to do some NLP to me, which we have a bit of a giggle about, because obviously, it's not do to, it's do with. And I try and explain that concept. But, I think, I do weave some of that stuff into the way that we talk and some of the things that my wife wants to achieve. I think there is real benefit in me being able to, use some of my learning and some of my new awareness to help my wife achieve in the way that I've achieved some of the things that I have. And then with the kids, I do talk to my kids slightly differently, and it's on a really, really base level. But we used to struggle getting anything out of our kids after they finished school. What did you do at school today? And then they're straight home and straight on the tablets, and it would be a little bit difficult getting anything out of them. And just by changing the words that I'm using and changing the questions that I'm asking, I'm inviting them to tell me more about what they've been doing, rather than just asking a direct question where they get to choose yes or no. I talk more about what was the best thing you did at school today, and tell me why it was the best. And that's really, really rudimentary stuff, but it is a change since attending my NLP practitioner program.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how the subtle changes in the way you talk to children can have a massive impact. I remember we had a guy on the course who'd always constantly struggled with getting his daughter to go to bed, and and this is one we hear from people in varying degrees quite often, but it would always end up in a bit of a head-to-head moment, and eventually his daughter would go to bed and they wouldn't be happy, and they'd play it all out and everything, and he simply shifted and changed it with the illusion of choice. That whole thing around, do you want to go to bed now or in 5 minutes? So it's a very cleverly sculptured question, which is also very simplistic, but actually for the child's perspective, you're empowering them to make a decision, and equally they realise that every decision has an outcome. They've got that ability to choose their outcome.
Yeah, I do find myself using double or triple binds with the kids quite often to give that illusion of choice, whilst sitting behind that it's one or the other that we've created. So it's simplistic, and I imagine at some point the kids will probably cotton on when they grow up a little bit more, but it does work quite well when they're the age that they are, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tom, you're also talking about you talked with your wife around some of the goals that you've achieved. So every time I see you, because thankfully you come back and join us to help coaching on some of the courses, so it's always a pleasure to see you. Every time I see you, I'm seeing less of you. So what tell us a little bit about the goal that you set. And
absolutely. So my goal was all around weight loss, but then having said that, I've had that goal for a number of years, and it's always been around weight loss, and for whatever reason it hasn't necessarily stuck, where I have managed to lose the weight and then it's come back on again, so I've kind of yo-yoed over a good few years. And I think primarily what the big difference is this time, there's two main strands to it. There's the NLP work that I did with it in terms of putting goals into my future, and I'll come back to that in a second. And then there's also some work that I've been doing inside of work as well, with my leadership development work. So if I talk about the NLP stuff first of all. So I think the biggest thing for me was about putting goals into my future, putting them in the present, but talking about them in terms of what I have. So envisaging myself in the future, but this is what I have, rather than what I don't have, or rather than what I don't want. And that's really empowering, talking about putting things into the positive. And if I think a little bit more technically about meta programs and toward away from meta programs, I've put everything into this is what I want to move towards, not what I'm trying to move away from. And I think probably previously I've always thought about losing weight as moving away from being overweight to moving towards being healthy, but I changed all of that and I said, no, this is what I want. So one of the things I did as soon as I got home from the practitioner program, I'm just looking up on my wall now because it's up there, I created an A1 chart which charted my progress with the weight loss, and that's really useful from a visual point of view, because I can visually see the downwards line as the days go across and as my weight comes down. But more importantly than that, what I've got in the right hand side is my goals, and I've put them up there so they're really visual. So every time I'm working at home and I look up, I see them, so it's things like I am healthy and fit, I sleep well, I keep up with the kids, I have breath, I maintain the momentum. So it's all stuff that I put into the future that I want, but it's worded as in this is what I have. And that for me is really, really useful and really powerful. And I think because my conscious mind knows what I want, but I think also I've been able to talk to my unconscious mind and put those goals in there, and that's what's really stuck, and that's what's helped the momentum going. So there's both some conscious and some unconscious stuff going on there. So that's where NLP's really helped. And then there was a little bit from the world of work that I'm doing, and it's this tool called the Immunity Map. And the Immunity Map is all about helping you analyze what's stopping you from achieving what you want in life. So it was a great exercise in reflecting on, well, what excuses am I making about going to the gym or eating healthily, or what assumptions am I making about going to the gym or eating healthily, or are there other things in my life that are getting in the way? So for example, an excuse that I was making was I don't have enough time for exercise. And when I thought about, what else is getting in the way? I was thinking, but I don't have enough time because I want to have enough time with the kids. And that was a competing commitment. The kids were, spending time with the kids is massively important, but was I using that as an excuse for not doing any exercise? So eventually when I challenged those assumptions, I realized, well, I get up really early most mornings and then lay around in bed for an hour, really not doing very much. So why don't I just go out and do some exercise then? So I found the time. So I think as a combination of some work I was doing internally, and then massively to do with the NLP and putting things into my future, that's what really helped. And I think The exercise we did on the last day, we went out for a nice walk into the country park and visualizing what my future would look like. I think that was massively helpful. I'm a very visual person, and I can still bring up the picture of what I wanted. And it was all about 3 months ahead of where we were on that day, that I was going to be sat at my friend's house on his spare bed, ready for a night out, wearing a shirt that I hadn't been able to fit into for quite a while. And when I actually got to that date 3 months ahead, that shirt was too big. Having not fitted into it for about a year, the shirt was too big and I couldn't end up wearing it anyway. So I ended up having to buy a new shirt, which became my new favorite shirt, So the results are fantastic. And as you say, you see less of me, and it's really nice that I see less of me as well, because it's important that, when I have a look in the mirror and I can see the progress, visually, that's really important. So yeah, it's had a profound effect on me of attending the NLP, and also supplemented with some work stuff as well.
Fabulous, thank you, Tom. So where to from here for you, Tom? What's next on your horizon?
So in terms of work, I've mentioned work being my day job and my bolt-on. What I'm really doing a lot of work at the moment is making that bolt-on a bigger part of my work. And although the coaching work that I do will never become a full-time occupation within John Lewis, because that role doesn't exist, I am doing a lot more in that space. So I've got more clients now than I've had previously, and I'm looking at what else can I do with my coaching. So that's looking at, are there coaching networking groups that I can go to where we can just get together with people from external organisations and talk about the world of coaching. I'm doing some work at the moment with a charity as well, who are looking to implement their own coaching proposition internally, and they want to find out from John Lewis how we've done it. So I'm doing some work with some leaders in that business as well. So a lot of my focus is on that coaching world, and that's really where my NLP journey is continuing. So obviously I'm coming back for the master's program in December, so it's a few months away yet, but I have just started listening to the pre-course work, the MP3s with Tad and his wife Adriana. So my next part of my NLP journey has started already, which is brilliant. And I think the reason why, let's start again. The part of masters that I'm really interested in is the linguistic side of it, and that's where the MP3s start off. So I'm now fascinated with values levels and quantum linguistics. That's where I started. So that stuff is fascinating, and that's what I want it to continue being. I want NLP to continue fascinating me. I want coaching and my learning work to continue fascinating me, and it's absolutely ticking some massive boxes for me at the moment. So from where I am now, Masters NLP is what's next, but thinking about next year, where may I go? I'm thinking timeline therapy is absolutely where I might go, and ultimately culminating in the Master NLP coach. Hopefully next year or maybe the year after. That's kind of where my mind's going, because as coaching becomes a bigger part of my world, whether that is within John Lewis or whether that's something that I do in the future where I look at starting my own coaching practice or working for another coaching consultancy, this is all stuff that can develop me, develop my potential as a coach, but also as a human, I think, more holistically.
As a human, how fabulous. So Tom, if you were going to leave us with one thing around your journey with NLP that people listening to this podcast, that it might resonate with them, what would it be?
What would it be? I think it would just be about having a really open mind to doing something completely different to what you may have done previously. We've all got lives worth of experience, and I think NLP has just enhanced that experience and opened my eyes to so much more in the world that I could achieve or I could do. So for anyone out there that's listening, that's thinking about NLP, it's absolutely something that I would recommend. I started off by listening to a free MP3 from one provider. Then I did another little workbook with another provider, and this really piqued my interest. Then I came to Edge and I did a taster session, and that was really the linchpin for me, where I thought this is absolutely what I want to do, because it was a fascinating 4 hours on a Saturday morning. And I thought, no, this is absolutely something I want to do. So, like I say, anyone that's out there that's listening, I would highly recommend NLP, and maybe do a taster session with Pip and Jules, just to dip your toe in the water to see if it's for you. But I think it'd be well worth it.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you, Tom. So, Tom, enjoy the rest of your week and what it holds for you. Thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us.
You're very welcome.
We're seeing you in December, aren't we, for Masters?
Yes, in December I'll be along for the Masters. I'm not sure that I can get down to you before that for any of the practitioner courses. I don't think the dates work. So December is likely when you'll see me next.
So if you could wear a badge with your name on it, because I suspect you might look very different yet again, that would be great, just for clarity, so I know it's you walking through the door. That would be fabulous. But Tom, for now, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. Really appreciate it. For those of you listening, you can find us on Spotify and on iTunes, and come and explore some of the other interviews we've had with other Edgeites. And yeah, once again, Tom, thank you very much for your time this morning.
You're very welcome. Thank you.